So you would say no
That's
Medicaid funding, or just no Medicaid funding for non-citizens.
You can give a little, couple month grace period or something like that, but that's got to end. And that's being incredibly generous based on the amount we've spent so far. You just can't have Maine taxpayers covering that kind of a burden. This is not the type of state that can afford that.
Ben Midgley, candidate for governor on the Republican ticket in Maine. Thank you very much for coming into the studio today.
Thanks very much for having me, Steve. Yeah.
I don't usually do this, but I want to just start at the beginning with your life story and a little bit of an introduction to the audience. I've read some of the material that you guys have put out, your basic biography, but I guess I just want to hear it from you, your story and what it was like growing up in the wealthy part of Maine.
Okay.
I was told growing up.
Yeah, well, it wasn't wealthy for me. So I grew up in Kennebunk, Maine, and I went to school there, had my whole childhood there. My wife's from Lyman, Maine, and we got married. We had 3 kids. Jumping ahead, my story in terms of just how I got to here in general, then I can go back and cover anything you want from the childhood if you want, is I never made it out of college, right? I tried to go to college. I was working 3 jobs while I was there. My parents sent me off with $500, which was kind of a surprise for me, and said, hey, good luck. You got the rest of the tuition and you can pay for food and all that stuff. So that's what you had to do. So I was working 3 jobs when I was out there. I think I lasted maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And one of those jobs was cleaning machines in a gym in exchange for a membership at the health club. And I kind of found a love of fitness and staying in shape at that young age, because previous to that, I had a lot of fun in high school, enjoyed myself like most high school kids do. But
were you an athlete or just a gym
I was
rat?
an athlete for half of high school,
okay,
and then kind of fell off of that, and just tried to enjoy my last few years of high school, and kind of left athletics behind for a little while, which I think is why I ended up back into fitness, because naturally I like to be active and generally try to eat healthy. So found my way in the fitness industry for about 6 or 7 years, working through different aspects of the industry from the ground up, like I said, from cleaning machines. Then ended up with some challenging times. I ended up on unemployment, ended up on food stamps, and that took about a year and a half or so, 2 years to get through. And that was back when food stamps were very brightly colored tickets that you would tear off in the grocery store aisle. And that was when I figured out that I can't stay there anymore and wanted to just advance myself. So I just stayed with the industry because I liked it. And then over 30 years, I ended up being the president of Planet Fitness, and left there, started another company called Crunch Fitness Franchising, and over 15 years built that to the #1 fitness franchise in the country, 48 states, 500 clubs, 3 million members, over $1 billion in revenue. And I created 15,000 jobs building that company. So that was great, right? Had a wonderful time. Then we sold the company a couple of times, and over the last year is when I decided that I was going to make the leap and jump into politics. And that's because over the last 7 years, it's been obvious that the state's not the same state we grew up in a lot of ways, which I'm sure you've heard from most candidates. And having the time and the means to contribute to the race. And my family's at an age now where the kids understand what's going on. I still have one in high school who I was a little concerned about how that's going to be reacted to. Being in southern Maine, it's a little bit more liberal, as you know. And but everybody's ready for it. And
in what way were you concerned about her being in high school?
Yeah, well, if you follow what's going on in education, right, teachers are fairly open about negative comments about Trump or anything political that they want to interject into the classroom, which to me is not appropriate, right? A teacher's there to teach a kid how to think, not what to think. And certainly in our school system, there was a lot of push, and I know this happened all over the state, teaching kids what to think, or trying to, right? And all 3 of my kids were going through school when all of this transition started. So it was something that sort of catches you off guard initially, and then you're like, wait a second, you're learning that? What are you learning again? How was that explained? And then it happens again and again, and then you're figuring out, okay, this is intentional. And then you got the school board meetings, you go through the whole process. I won't bring you through it, but regularly and I'm a very involved parent with my kids at school because I'm concerned about what they're learning and how they're taking that in. And I want to make sure they understand all sides of an issue. So I just anticipated that there was going to be some comments thrown her way about her father being a Republican and running for governor. So I went and met with the school, and honestly, they received it pretty well. We've only been a candidate since August 5th, so nothing
So
yet.
the school received it pretty well. What is that, only like 10 death threats?
Yeah, so far.
From the teachers?
Six or seven.
I mean,
but,
it really is. I said it this morning on the radio, but I am surprised at how many teachers are just setting their careers on fire, thinking that it's okay.
Well, one of them was in our school system.
Yeah.
That made it to your paper.
Yeah.
Right, and I called the superintendent on that. It was,
which I think is totally legitimate for parents not to want like psychos who post about like murder fan fiction or celebrate murder. I think it's totally legitimate for parents not to want those people in schools. Not just like teaching their kids, but not in schools
not even
at
in
all.
The school. Right? That's
like,
an
totally different
unstable
from
person.
Cancel culture. There's, during the cancel culture, phenomenon, you had people who were being canceled just for their views didn't line up with what liberals think about politics, maybe in a statement that they posted 10 years ago. Now this seems, it's very recent. It reflects directly on the person, their attitudes, their sense of responsibility, and what they say in a classroom. And I think parents have a right not to have psychos in the schools.
100%. And in this day and age, you never know when that's going to cross the line to action.
Well,
right?
for sure.
And then kids could be literally in danger with that.
Or how many comments didn't make it to Facebook?
Oh my God!
How many were just like remarks in the classroom, or how many teachers had those thoughts and didn't post them on Facebook? Maybe we should be more worried about those people.
Right. And what's very hypocritical about the situation, right, is when Biden was president, if a teacher was making a negative comment the other way, it's fine. It's okay, right? That's just freedom of speech. It's political expression. So it's definitely a one-sided story that I think the school. I mean, we could talk about schools for a long time in the state, but I think the education system's learning a hard lesson. Are they going to learn a lesson from it? I don't know. If we win the race, certainly we're going to fix that up and make changes. There's a large bureaucracy there you have to work through, but. You're talking about our kids, right? These are things kids should not have to deal with, right? You should just go to school and get educated and enjoy yourself, and ideally be prepared for a career where maybe you can stay in Maine too.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be unpopular to say, but I think that the problems in our education system are even more like deeply rooted, going back to taking so many kids from the University of Maine system to be teachers. We lowered the bar real low. Like, we're going to wipe away your student debt if you just are an education major.
Right.
We made it really easy and created all these incentives to become a teacher, when maybe you should be thinking about it the exact opposite way, where we want the most talented people, the most successful people, smartest people to be teachers, rather than people who just get credentials and take the right classes at University of Maine in Farmington or University of Southern Maine.
And over the whole last 6 years, I mean, they even lowered the bar, right, for folks to become teachers because of a shortage of teachers. Yeah. So it's just degrades all around. So
I guess you mentioned, part of your motivation for running for governor now is that you, over the last 7 years, you've looked at the state, and like a lot of us, you're concerned. You don't really recognize what exactly the direction the state's heading in. Would you say that you see it most acutely in the education space, or are there other areas where you see, a fundamentally different Maine than what you knew growing up?
A lot of areas, but I probably pay attention more than most, right, because of what I'm doing now. Education certainly is an issue. The lack of solid financial management in the state, which relates to a complete and utter lack of respect for the fact that a state doesn't have any money except for taxpayers' money. And, the way we're spending right now and the way the budget's increased, it took 200 years to get to $7 billion and 6 more years to get to roughly 12. You can't keep up with that, right? You're driving businesses out of the state. I've got a lot of friends that are very, very frustrated. I visited, I think, 39 industries at this point, many more individual businesses, but I broke about by industry. You hear the same exact things all over the state, and there's just immense frustration with what's going on. Hard to keep employees, the regulations that are put on the state, the cost to do business in the state, the taxes, energy. I mean, there's so many things working against business, which works against the economy, right? And so when the state needs more money rather than thriving on a well-oiled economy and consumer spending that should be happening and could be happening in Maine, you just say, well, there's more money out there. Let's just go take it from whoever's left in the state. And then as more businesses leave and more people leave the state, you have to keep suppressing that tax debt and burden on everybody who's left one way or another. I mean, you look at the budget process now, and sorry to be going off on the budget
No,
side
we're on like the second or third pressing of the grapes, so to speak.
Right.
They just keep trying to squeeze to get more revenue out of the same existing taxpayers.
These little things they're doing, right? We're gonna raise fishing licenses or hunting licenses.
They raised arborist fees.
Right, arborist
it's now
fees.
more expensive to be a
Netflix.
licensed arborist in Maine. Like somebody thought, hey, we can get him there. We can get him there.
Right. And you raised $6 million on a $12 billion budget. So they've wrung out everything they can wring out from that sponge. And next you have to increase taxes. And you know the tax bills that are already on the table to, change the tax brackets for folks right now when our tax levels are already too high. We've got folks at $23,000 paying 5.8% tax on that income when you've got Massachusetts charging 5%, I think up to $1 million. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're taxed higher than Massachusetts, and forget about sales tax and property tax and excise tax and all that. When you add it all up, obviously we're one of the highest tax states in the country. So very, very poor financial management. The culture is terrible in Augusta. It's horrible. Republicans are so frustrated right now. Democrats, you got a small group of those Democrats that are just running everything. It's very ideological right now. It's not about what's good for people in the state. My view is, do right, do good. Maybe that's not generally a Republican saying, what have you.
You can make it one.
Yeah, it should be.
That's how all sayings start.
It should be, right?
Yeah.
Because that's your job in government, is to take care of the most people possible. You're not going to have everybody agree with you, and not everything you're going to do is going to make people happy, but your job is to make sure government doesn't get in the way of people, right? It makes your life easier, not harder, and that's gone. That's completely neglected. So you've got education. There's no more. You've got the economy. Opportunity, right, is very, very reduced, let's say, over the last 7 years. It's very hard for your kids or my kids or anybody's kids to have a real opportunity to make it in the state of Maine. If they get an education, they're generally moving out of the state. We got to get more kids to stay in the state and have careers here. The governor is not out in front of getting investment into the state. I haven't seen a good large business opening in the last 7 years, no big solid job announcements. And that's a governor's job, is to bring investment into the state. You can use incentives. There's some people who argue against corporate incentives, but if you're bringing jobs and you're revitalizing communities, you got to get those businesses in here all day long, because without the jobs for large businesses, medium businesses, small businesses, none of it's going to work. Nothing else works. So you've just seen this degradation of essentially the whole system, for ideological goals and sort of the mission of the Democrats now. And it's gotten to the point that I'm really actually glad to see this many people running in the Republican primary, right? Because it shows that many people are concerned about the future of the state. So
what do you think is the mission of the Democrats in Maine? Like, what is their ideology?
I think they're just following California and such, or Oregon, right? I think Maine's about 3 or 4 years behind. And I don't think there's really an original thought that comes out of the Democrats on that side, right? If it's a social-based program and they think it brings some kind of good to their party, they're going to spend it. But if it's a Republican initiative, maybe you want to spend some more money to support law enforcement because too many kids are dying of drugs or overdoses. Our nephew died of a drug overdose, right? That's affected so many families in the state. We're not going to pay for that, right? But we'll take care of this. And now you look at California. I'm sure you've read about this, right? They're doing anything now to keep the refineries in the state. They're willing to break their own climate rules just to keep refineries in the state because they finally realize they're just blowing people out from an expense standpoint. So we're right that we're actually trying to accelerate past their curve, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like the Democrats think we have to do some catch up in that area. So it's gone off the rails essentially, and it's just got to be pulled back, right? A little more common sense, a little more balance. And ideally, my dream is that government becomes boring again. There was a time when people didn't worry that much about government, right? Because it was just doing what it's supposed to do. And then, you've got this heavy left, heavy right. There's people in the middle get a little strangled out, but I know there's still more people in the middle who just want things to work. So I do think we can get back there, but with anything, this is a long-term view. You can't do things like this in the short term. So I think if you're committed to it, though, you can make it happen, and I really feel we can get there. So, work ahead.
Sorry to hear about your nephew. It's it's an issue that I think Democrats threw money at to solve, like Narcan, harm reduction, needle exchanges, and we're kind of 6 or 7 years into this experiment with if we just do more Medicaid money for rehab needles instead of exchanging them, we're just going to hand them out willy-nilly through left-wing nonprofits, and we're going to make Narcan as subsidized and broadly available as possible, and we're going to subsidize Suboxone. They thought that would be the answer. It seems like it's not.
Promotes almost more drug use.
That's kind of where we are. If you look at the
situations where some
Suboxone
of those drugs will save lives, but that's not the answer. That's good to have in case. But almost every policy you just mentioned, whether it's in Oregon or other states, it's failed. It's already proven to fail. And again, that's another issue with Maine, trying to catch up on the curve just to find out for themselves that something failed in another state.
Yeah, and Oregon has already reversed course on the safe injection sites. But Maine is still chomping at the bit to do that, including some Republicans, by the way, are interested in these safe injection sites, which, we kind of tried it at Marginal Way a few years ago, and Four River Parkway and a couple other places in Portland, and the Camp Hope in Bangor. We've tried the safe injection sites, and they're not safe. They just are an easy place for dealers to go find new customers.
There's your customer base right there. Yeah.
How would you change the state's approach to combating drug addiction, the ill consequences of drugs, the opioid epidemic, and all the crime that spirals out from it? I know you mentioned increasing funding for law enforcement, but is there a specific strategic way that you would go about spending that money?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to talk about that one, right? And when you talk about combating drugs, that's pretty broad, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the issue you're a champion of, right? With the illegal Chinese marijuana growth. So I'll just take the liberty of putting it all sort of in the same bucket, right? Obviously, you've got to cooperate with federal authorities where practical, right? A lot of the drugs coming into the state right now are from there's actually two main gangs, which I'm sure you know, cartels, I should say, that deliver most of the drugs to all 50 states. That's the Jalisco cartel and the Sinaloa, right? Yeah. Those two cartels
and the Trinitarios from the Dominican,
but they're the largest drivers of drugs in all 50 states. And then they sell to the other gangs and just thugs or anybody who's going to do it. Yeah. So you've got to cooperate with federal authorities to do that, right?
And I would just say it's worth including that. That cooperation has to extend to immigration authorities when you're dealing with transnational crime. Like when you're dealing with crime that uses illegal aliens and imposter identities, you can't really successfully combat the trafficking without working with immigration authorities, which is a bill on the table right now that Governor Mills probably will sign just despite President Trump.
1971.
That would prevent this kind of cooperation.
That's what you're talking about. Right?
Yes, yeah. Right. Yeah. So it'd be like in the case with the Trinitarios that just opened fire on Rumford cops.
Right.
We're not going to allow them to reach out to immigration authorities when cops' lives are on the line? Yeah. Yeah. That would be the consequence of that bill.
It's disgusting all the way around. So you've got to obviously cooperate with federal authorities and, as you mentioned, immigration authorities. I've talked to a lot of sheriffs in the state, and none of them want you to share their name, right? Because they're walking a line right, in their profession. They want to do the right thing, all the men and women in law enforcement, but their hands are tied in many cases. So they need additional funding. They need additional resources. You have to make the career more attractive to people. You have recruitment issues of the jobs that go vacant in police forces across the state. I think the average now is 60% of those jobs take 6 months just to refill them. And then you've got to train these folks and you got to get them back on the street. So it's a really, really hard process. You've got degraded jails. You've got some sheriffs just trying to get a bond issue to get a new jail in their community, which would be so much more beneficial for them because they're paying the same amount just to maintain the old one. That's not even workable for what they need. You have bail violations, which I think is the number one most frequent issue popping up for these law enforcement officers now, because they catch someone, they bring him in, they get out, they violate bail, they violate bail, they violate bail, they violate bail.
You have a massive recidivism problem. Yeah,
keeps happening.
Yeah.
So it's broken on so many different levels, and then you have legislators trying to increase the levels of drugs that folks can have or what you're going to charge folks for. You have judges that in some cases just won't even prosecute people, right? So you've got to get into all aspects of the system, sit down with law enforcement of all levels, state police, federal investigators, and you've got to systematically build back up what is broken, right? The way I like to think, like if you look at something like education in the state, and I'm not going to change subjects, but it's a very big bureaucracy. And if you're going to start to modify how something is worked and utilized in the state, you have to understand how it was built, right? Because you can't understand how to sort of dismantle things that aren't effective unless you know exactly how it's built. So I spend a lot of time talking to folks around the state. Well, how did that get to here? And then how did this relate to that, right? So once you understand the whole structure, then you can more effectively go in and have your day one plan for all different aspects of the government, which you need. Whoever wins, right? Hopefully it'll be me, but you've got to have day one plans for all of these areas so you can get right to it because there's a tremendous amount of work.
So when you look at some of the things like, teachers, we would like a higher quality of teacher. Everybody can agree on that. We would like more professional police officers and fully staffed police departments. I think the left would immediately say, well, that requires more money. So how can you both say you want to reduce taxes and reduce government spending while also saying that we need to reallocate resources in these other areas?
Sure.
So I guess how do you balance the need that I think everyone to the right of Bernie Sanders would look at state government here and be like, yeah, there's some fat to trim. You could do away with some of this spending. How do you balance that against the need to come in and prioritize spending in a conservative direction? I
think I'd give a process-based answer, right? The state does not have a revenue problem, like we talked about, right? And then the Treasury cash pool right now has about $400 to $500 million more money that it really needs to have in there. That's where we keep all the general funds and the budget stabilization fund, other sources of revenue and stuff. So there's actually plenty of money. If you look at the budget that the governor submitted, it's 57 line items. Let's say 79% of that is all DHHS and then Department of Education. So that's the bulk of your savings. So when a new governor comes in, whoever it is, you've got 2 months to dig into that budget and submit your changes and then also propose tax decreases in that same budget, right? Then you've got to go through the negotiation process and all that. And you could always hit something later on. But there is so much money being spent. Just look at the benefits we're handing out to illegal migrants, right? We're one of 6 states that hands out the level of benefits that we do. My estimation is if you look at all the benefits combined in that area, there's probably hundreds of millions of dollars right there that you could just bring back, right? The trick is getting into the numbers because nobody has visibility on that yet. The Democrats certainly aren't going to share that. But once you can get into the budget, and you've got 57 condensed line items, but you get below that, there's thousands of lines of budget. So having a business background with significant sized business is certainly a benefit to get in there. But then you have to look at what's being spent efficiently, what's being spent effectively. You can't just, redline a budget line when it comes to something like medical care, right, for people without understanding exactly what dollars you're cutting. So you've got to be very thoughtful and purposeful in this. And you don't want to damage people, have a Republican come into office and just cut spending for the sake of cutting spending. You've got to take care of people that need to be taken care of. But there's certainly going to be opportunity to reduce funding that is appropriately needed to be reduced, let's say, and then divert that over to other areas. And then with the tax proposals, you've got to run that through different modeling, right, and see how you're going to offset the revenue that you need with the tax decreases. And you can't probably go from here to here right away, right? You've got to transition in that. But each time you submit a budget, you can start to move that forward. And then if you look at the last tax decreases we've had in the state, 2011, 2015, both times we did that. And this happens nationally too on the trend. You'll have a little dip in the taxes initially, then revenue exceeds your expectations. So
JFK believed that.
Yeah.
JFK was a Democratic president, knew that if you reduce the capital gains tax, you get more investment and you actually end up with more government revenue because you earn it through growth.
Right, and that's where I'm at, right? And then you incentivize businesses on the other side, right? So you're not just looking at the stagnant budget, right? The reason they're saying revenue is going to decrease in the future from the accounting office here is because they're not anticipating any job growth or any business growth in the state. So once
why would they?
Right.
I mean, at least they're being honest about it.
Exactly. But
that might be the only thing that they're being honest about.
So you tighten up the spending, right? Get rid of the stuff you don't need to get rid of, move things over into different areas, and then you incentivize the growth too. You get a little bit tax decrease. Sorry. You get people spending more in the economy, more opportunity. All of a sudden things start to go. But first you've got to stabilize it, right? You got to give people a chance to feel like their feet are underneath them. They take a breath, and then you go up from there, right? So you got a little triage you got to do right now. And if you don't get it right initially on all your proposals, right, you'll get that done through the budgeting process. But that's why you need somebody great to run it. Like we've been talking a lot, and I'll just name drop him. Alec Porteous. He used to be the commissioner at DAS on another page. Guy's brilliant. Would be a wonderful guy like that to bring into the department, who knows the inner workings of it. Young guy, super smart. Knows where all the money's hidden.
I'm going to offer him more than whatever you offer him to come up with the main wire.
Guy's fantastic.
I want him as well.
Guy's fantastic. But part of this, doing this right too, is making sure you're doing the work to get the right team in place, right? Should you be the one who goes forward, because you've got a tremendous amount of work to get into on day one. But financial engineering, once you get into the budget, I think we're going to find there's lots of opportunity there.
On the tax side, there was some conversation at the most recent debate about the value-added tax, the kind of the trade-off between sales tax versus income tax.
Yeah.
I know this has kind of been a subject of philosophical debate amongst conservatives for a while. On the left, they'll just take like any tax. They want all your money, 100% tax rate. Yeah. But there is a school of conservatives who think, well, the income tax is a necessary evil. And there's also advocates of what I first learned of as the fair tax, which is just a purely consumption-based tax model. Right. And we do have the New Hampshire next door, which is it doesn't have an income tax. I guess what direction do you lean on when you're looking at a consumption tax versus an income tax? And do you think it's feasible for Maine to transition sometime within our lifetimes to not having an income tax?
I think so. I mean, first of all, a lot of this, like I've talked to a number of the Republican legislators who've worked on proposals like this, right? And when you talk to them, a number of them are pretty thorough, but there's a lot of gaps in some of the assumptions made when these models are done. So you've got to have a lot of different inputs and considerations when you're forecasting something like that out. I'd like to get rid of income tax. I don't think you can do it right off the bat, right? Yeah. Property taxes are out of control. We're almost at crisis level with property taxes, with the increase in property values, especially for seniors and stuff. And then you have all these school budgets, that are being rejected because you've got folks getting the reassessment on their home and an increase in the school budget at the same time. It's too much. So from a government perspective, I think whoever gets in, certainly if I get in, you've got to use every tool you have to either freeze property tax right away or reverse it on folks. I mean, the Democrats put us in the spot with getting rid of the Senior Stabilization Act for their taxes and raising the cap, or taking away the cap that municipalities can charge.
A 25-year-old cap on property taxes.
Right? Yeah. So that's again on their lap.
we had, according to the Maine Municipal Association, we had to get rid of that cap just to make it easier for town clerks.
Sure, that's what should drive the decision making.
I think they even argued that it was going to be a revenue.
An easier time.
Yeah, it was going to be a revenue saver. I think they even argued that.
So I'm putting property tax on the side, but that's almost seriously. It's crisis level. You got to nip that in the bud. That's like you got to get on that right away. I think in terms of how fast we can move taxes down is going to depend on how much spending we can cut, right? So I think you'd probably have a lot of Republican candidates that would love to sit here and say, guess what, Steve, we're going to no tax in 1 year, and hopefully that gets a couple of votes. Realistically, that can't happen, right? Because you're going to leave a lot of gaps in the budget, but you can intelligently start to lower taxes as you're lowering spending, right, and increasing revenue. So you've got to make your initial proposals when you submit your budget, so you have to go in with something reasonable, and you can forecast out moderate tax increases so people feel it right away, and then, get your level set and then go further from there. But, New Hampshire's doing it right, Florida's doing it right. I mean, why do you have so many people living out of state 6 months in a day, right? They love Maine, it's beautiful, it's a wonderful place to be. You just don't want to have to deal with what
you
the
don't pay for it.
Trying to put on you, right? And those people will come back, right? I think Maine's used to have roughly 2,500 millionaires, and now we're well below that, and all those tax dollars are gone. Same thing happens with the business taxes. So you got to get them back, and I think if we can become a little more, let's say, consumer friendly, right, which is residents, they'll come back.
On the spending side, you mentioned the entitlement state that we have, the benefits that we have. We have a very large welfare apparatus in this state, despite Governor LePage for 4 years kind of standing in the breach and refusing to expand Medicaid. We now have 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 people on Medicaid, which is the most expensive budget line item. It's massive, and a lot of that's paid for by the federal government, but it's still the biggest program we have. And as a result of the Medicaid expansion, we now have this class of people who are able-bodied childless adults who qualify for Medicaid. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act that President Trump just signed into law does reform and tighten up Medicaid, but states still have so much leeway over this program. So do you think, I guess, when it comes to Medicaid, should these able-bodied childless adults, there's not like a convenient way to say that, able-bodied childless adults,
you guys say that.
Should they be eligible for Medicaid in the way that they are now, basically forever, or is that something that the state needs to look at, putting a time limit on, a total spending limit, or some other kinds of limits? And do you think that the generous welfare state is contributing to workforce challenges in the state? So we have less than a sub 60% workforce participation rate for the first time in a half a century, and it's lingered since COVID.
You got 3 or 4 different subjects there. Right? Yeah, I think the way you phrased that is a little different than I've heard from some other folks. So on the first part, on if someone's completely able-bodied, should they be eligible? Honestly, probably not. Right? I don't want to exclude certain conditions, but you're saying completely eligible. There should be nothing in the way of this. Yeah,
no mental. Right? You don't need a mental or physical health diagnosis in order to be on Medicaid.
You definitely have to have work requirements, but like I do, the work requirements are also volunteering. It's training programs, right? So that certainly has to come in there. And I think the biggest concern on the opposition side is not that there's work requirements, right? Because a lot of even Democrats in the past at least have supported that. You could pull the tape and see that. It's just the communication process to those folks that now they have to do that, and somewhere along the line you don't get the information to them. Somebody loses their benefits for whatever reason, and that's generally the argument. But I think if you're effective enough from a government standpoint, you can close those gaps, right, and get those people information. The amount of folks that have benefits in the state is far too much, right? 30+%, give or take. For me, a couple of things. One, when we did the expansion years ago, when Obamacare came in, right, and these are folks that are reimbursed at 90%, not 60%. I don't know how many people brought this up, but 90,000 folks who had private insurance switched over to state insurance.
Why wouldn't you?
That's not the way it's supposed to work.
But you're a rational economic actor. It's just like people who decide not to make an extra $1 at work, waiting tables, because if they do, then they're not going to qualify for an EBT card or Medicaid, hitting the cliff. Like, they're rational economic actors. They might not have, college degrees or something, but they understand, more money, more work for less money is not a deal.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that's exactly the point I was going to.
It's something that it's so frustrating because, I've been following Maine politics for like 12 years now, and everyone talks about the benefit cliff on the left and on the right. No one ever does anything about it.
So here's what you do. And I've been saying this from the beginning. You have to create a bridge, right? First of all, I don't think folks want to stay in that category. I mean, unless you're completely lazy for whatever reason you don't want to. And there's some of those, but the majority of folks want to better their opportunity. They want to provide more for their family, a better life. So you just have to create a bridge for those folks. You might need a federal waiver, right, which is fine. But if you take away that cliff and you say, okay, if you start to make X, maybe you pay $50 into the system for your health insurance. If you make X, you pay $100. If you had 50,000 out of these 430,000 people paying $100, that's $60 million right off the budget right there, right? And then they're starting to do better and do better and do better. And then that becomes a little bit contagious. And also, when you're out working and being productive, you feel better about yourself.
When you're healthier. Yeah. You're just physically healthier.
There's no question about that, right? So the bridge is very, very important, right, along with work requirements and those other things. There was actually one more point I wanted to mention, and I forgot. the last part of the question?
Well, I guess where I was going with it is the just Medicaid eligibility generally in the state. We also, as you brought up earlier, make non-citizens eligible for Medicaid.
Well, that's got to,
which is a state choice.
Has to stop. Yeah, that's.
So you would say no Medicaid funding, or just no Medicaid funding for non-citizens.
You can give a little, couple month grace period or something like that, but that's got to end. And that's being incredibly generous based on the amount we've spent so far. You just can't have Maine taxpayers covering that kind of a burden. This is not the type of state that can afford that, right? So
I don't honestly think we even know how much non-citizens have cost in Medicaid.
I think we know. I think won't get disclosed.
Oh, well, that's it. Yes,
pushed
yeah.
out of the Democrats.
Yeah,
right?
DHHS I think
Because
hasn't disclosed that, or at least they don't keep track of it in a way that would allow them to disclose it. But we know that based on Governor Mills' budget proposal, she talked about taking away the hardship exemption for 5,000 non-citizens who are on food stamps, are work eligible, but aren't taking jobs. Yeah. And that was going to be $7 million over 2 years. So they've got the ability to tell us how much we're spending on non-citizens.
Plenty of data, right? And they are doing some tricky things where they're sort of reclassifying people so they can, shell game it around so someone get a hold of the data, but we can certainly find that information out. A couple of things on welfare. I mean, what LePage did years ago, it was not popular, right? Putting your pictures on your EBT cards, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah,
right?
well, they need photo ID when they're voting, so why not?
Do it, right? Yeah. And then the cash incentive. I mean, there's a lot of fraud in the system too, and you've pointed out a lot of fraud in the Medicaid system, right? That's there. It has to be prosecuted.
More to come.
It's completely being overlooked, but a lot of the cash benefit cards are being used in tourist spots.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we again, it feels like deja vu with the welfare cliff or with the out-of-state spending. I mean, we covered this the first time I was at the Maine Wire back when Governor LePage was running for re-election. People using their food stamp cards in Hawaii, the Virgin Islands, places I've never been, Disneyland. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But it seems to never get fixed. Like the argument we got was that a woman who is on welfare may be fleeing a domestic abuse situation, so therefore the EBT cards need to work in all 50 states.
Well, I would say then you contact that other state and you get that person benefits in the other state. And then, I mean, there's these silly, and I'm not trying to degrade it, but you have to when it's used in this way, sort of emotional heartstring answers that are anecdotal here and there. That's not the case. And I will say this, the Democrats do much better at sound bites and storytelling, right, than the Republicans do, right? And that's really almost the whole MO over there. So one of the things that's important to me, jumping off the welfare just for a little bit, is, should we win, and I'll say whoever wins, but you have to do a good job of taking that back from the Democrats. The Republicans have never been very effective doing that. So whoever is governor needs to make sure that the storytelling and the sound bites that you're producing are efficient and effective and really deliver the message to people that Republicans are the one that is here to truly take care of you. Do something that's better for you. Not pay for everything, right? But create better opportunity for you. We're looking out for yourself, your family, and then get the younger generations of Republicans, more tuned up to take the lead, because I'm not interested in winning for 4 years, right? I think there's probably some people who are willing to do anything, just to get in office, right? But you don't want to get in office just for 4 years and burn the house down to do that. You want to get in and set Republicans up for 8 years, 12 years, 16 years. So there are some fundamental changes we have to make to the party in the state, which I think you'd probably agree with. But I don't think they're big challenges to make those changes, right? Because if we just win for 4 years, you're going to do a lot of work and it's all going to be turned around at the end of 4 years, right? So you've got to make structural changes to the way the party's interacting with community members and really putting our best foot forward so people buy into what Republicans are trying to do for them.
Well, yeah, I think we can expand on that a little bit, because I've asked a lot of the candidates or elected officials how they see their role as a party leader in the state. There's a lot of states like, in Florida, Ron DeSantis is like the godfather of the Florida Republicans. Right. So a lot of states where the governor or some of the highest ranking officials from the party take a leadership role in helping to build up the party, recruiting new candidates. There's an informal leadership aspect that we really haven't seen much of in Maine. And I think part of that was because Governor LePage was too busy being attacked by Republicans. I think there was a lot of like bunker mentality, justifiably so. So maybe there wasn't enough bandwidth to engage in the party building stuff. But it does seem like the lawmakers and Republican activists we have, there's not an intentionality to the, I guess, the activist building in conservative circles.
I think that's a top-down initiative, right? You have to set that culture and that expectation that that is what you want. To me, if we only went for 4 years, that's a fail, right? You catch your breath for a little bit, and then you're right back in it. So I think the governor has to, and I certainly would, make sure you're identifying those same people who want to continue to rise up through the party. I'm 55, right? I mean, I'm pretty young, but I'm not as young as a lot of these folks.
You're Generation X, right?
Right.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, this is the time. This is the election cycle for Gen X to start.
That's what I'm feeling. Right.
Boxing out the baby boomers.
Yeah.
Good Lord, the baby boomers have done enough to destroy this. But the Gen Xers have just been out making money while the millennials have been suffering.
But it's building your bench, like you're talking about, right? So Florida's doing a great job. We need to really get that going here, but the culture has to drive that, right? If people feel that culture is genuine and it's authentic, and we're here not just to win one time, but 2 times and 3 times, and then you have those after action reviews. What went wrong in this election? What happened wrong in this election? How can we do this better? How can we do that better? How's our data, right, to support these candidates? How's our fundraising vehicles? How's our marketing? What are the best practices there? What are we doing good on social? What aren't we doing good on social? Share that information with all the candidates and all the races, then all of a sudden your machine starts to work, right? And you do it with the best of intentions for the people of the state of Maine, right? So the authenticity drives it. But when you add the authenticity and the genuine culture to, real solid logistical practices, then I think you can really do some damage in a good way.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. So if I'm someone who has been deeply involved in Republican efforts, like the committee level or the town level or something, hearing those criticisms might think, well, what has Ben been doing for the Republican Party for the last 5 years, 10 years?
Sure.
So what's the answer to that?
Well, I'm from outside of politics, completely, right? I've been an outside observer. I'm not a politician, and I think that's one of the...
Did you vote for Obama in 2008?
Did it 2008, years ago? I think I voted for Obama once, a long time ago.
Yeah, I think I voted for Elliot Cutler.
Yeah, I used to be a Democrat.
I think Governor LePage.
Right? Donald Trump donated to Kamala Harris, right? So, but I mean, you quickly realize that wasn't the right place to be, right? So, I've observed politics intently over many years, as you have. But no, I haven't contributed nearly enough to the Republican Party in my past life, right? I was building businesses, right? Creating jobs, doing those things. And then, saying to myself, if I ever get in, here's what I'd like to see for a change. And then, you get in and sometimes your perspectives change. Sometimes you say, oh, you know what, that idea, that just won't work because of X. But this one just might work, right? And what if, you come up with a new idea and you start getting those juices flowing with folks that have been in the political process, and then you pressure test, right? Well, have you done that? And what if we did this? And I've been in situations with some very tenured politicians, when you really dig into sort of the construct, like we were talking about, how something was built, and you say, well, what about that? What about that? And then you get that moment where somebody says, you know what? We never tried that. Right? Well, what if we tried that? Well, I'm not sure. We got to go look at that. But I'm sure there are a lot of ways that if you get some fresh blood into the state government, we can make some things happen that are going to be very productive for people.
You mentioned earlier recruiting businesses to come to the state of Maine. I've heard, economic speakers and politicians talk about the Maine. There's a real lack of a tech sector in Maine, but we have some geographic advantages when it comes to having data warehouses.
Right.
Because it's so cold here during the winter. There's a portion of the year
cold
where
can be good though for data warehouse.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's a portion of the year where you don't have to pay to cool a data center.
Yep.
With the rise of AI, more demand for data centers, it would seem like there's a natural opportunity for a forward-looking economic planner to say, hey, how are we going to create an environment where data centers want to come to Maine?
Yep.
And we have all these natural advantages, but then we have electricity. That's, the other main, the big main ingredient of a data center or an AI center, all of this, it's electricity. And we have, if you were trying to have the most expensive electricity in the state, you really couldn't have done better than the policies that have been passed over the last 7 years.
100%.
How do you reverse course on that that whole world that seems like
Sure.
committed to the crony welfare for solar panels and wind turbines. You see them in Augusta. They're walking around telling you how great solar and wind are. Yeah. They're going to save the world. We're going to lower the temperature of the Gulf of Maine and save the future.
Which is already lower, by the way. It's already going down.
But I mean, that's the argument. Governor Mills thinks she can change the weather, so we need to pay higher electricity bills, and it just precludes so many businesses from coming to the state. Like we can't all be, painters and artists.
Right.
Some businesses require a heavy electrical load. And I think that the rise of the AI sector is kind of a clarifying moment, because people left, right, that the tech libertarians, everybody's saying, well, we're going to need a lot of electricity. So people are kind of, their eyes are open around nuclear.
Take up as much electricity for 100,000 homes, depending on the size of it, which is extreme energy use, right?
So how do you get Maine in a spot in 4 to 8 years to be competing for those data centers, which could come with, good jobs, tech jobs, data center jobs, as opposed to, working at a convenience store run by some family from India?
I think we need to compete for a lot of different jobs, right? So before I hit the energy button, right? I mean, obviously you've got to support your primary industries in the state, right? You've got logging, you've got fishing, you've got lobstermen, you've got agriculture, you've got tourism. I mean, these are primary main industries that you have to always support, just from a governor standpoint. And a lot of them don't feel supported, for one reason or another. They each have their own certain issues that the state could do better at. From the AI center standpoint, I mean, they're good job producers, right? But, that would only be part of the solution. I kind of bulk them in with just anybody who's going to bring a good amount of jobs into the state, hundreds of jobs, if not thousands of jobs, and you need to have a lot of different industries to do that. The specific complications around AI are power usage, right? Is it the best time to bring an AI data center into the state? Not now, right? And they're not going to do it because it's far too expensive to do it here. You just do it in Texas or somewhere else that has cheaper energy. So you got to solve the energy problem. On the energy problem, that's, to your point, it's 100% self-made. You can't change the weather over Maine, no matter what you do. But that goes to the soundbite thing I was telling you about, right? And the storytelling. I guarantee half of Mainers think you can change the weather over Maine, right? The encroaching oceans that are breaking down wharfs and stuff or getting into people's lawns, that's all going to change if we just go solar. There's some wholehearted belief in that, and it's clearly not going to do anything. I think if you took every bit of carbon out of the atmosphere from the state of Maine, you'd lower the global temperature by 4/1,000,000 of 1%. Right? It's mathematically
maybe. Yeah, mathematically
right?
negligible. Yeah. I mean, we're a net sequestration state anyways. Right. It's like we're not the big problem here.
So on energy, there's a number of things you can do. The problem now is when they created this solar program, you had a lot of lobbyists in their ears and activists. There's no cap on the amount of solar fields that can be built in the state of Maine. We met with CMP and went over a lot of detail in there. And look, I was never the biggest CMP fan, and I told them that was years ago. But obviously, they're being made to look like the bad guy.
They are
in all of this,
which is the genius of the scheme, is that they turned CMP into their bill collectors.
Right.
They're often Montana or California or New York, and they just collect the payments from CMP, and CMP takes all the heat.
Right. So that's, again, information to the people of the state. Once people understand how badly they're being ripped off by solar, then all of a sudden moods change, attitudes change, even those who think it's a good thing. So the issue now is the grid initially, and this is going to take a couple minutes if that's okay.
No, I think it's a hugely important topic that just doesn't get talked about enough.
So the grid was made for energy comes up, right, and gets dispersed out through the state. There are so many solar fields in the state right now that energy is coming back in reverse to the grid. So it's causing these 50, 60, 70-year-old transformers that they can take energy in from the top, but usually comes in from the bottom and gets dispersed out. It's causing them to take energy in from the top from all these different areas, and you have certain switches in them, I won't get too technical, that used to fire 12 times a day that are now firing 100 times a day, because so much energy is coming from here and there. And it's breaking down the infrastructure of our grid. So not only are we paying this extra, I think the forecast is roughly $200 million of stranded costs for the next 20 years, not only are we paying 3 to 4 times what solar actually costs to make because they're subsidizing the rate, you can make solar energy for 4 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, not 17, 18, 20 cents. We're also paying to reconstruct the entire grid. So it's a complete disaster all the way around. So you have
and even I think customizing it in a way that doesn't make sense based on population. Because where a solar company can buy land in northern Maine and put up solar panels isn't necessarily where you need the power. So you're making these huge grid upgrades just to accommodate that solar panel field rather than demand for electricity.
Right, and the state uses about 1,200 megawatts a day right now. They're already up to 800 a day from solar energy, and it's incredibly expensive, as well as degrading our network, right? So it's really, really broken. The contracts that the solar companies have with the state have a legislative clause in it. So they tried to make it so you have to get legislative approval to change their contracts, right? So it's important not only to get the governor in the office, but certainly at least the House, right? And then if you put some sunlight on the issue and expose this to the people of the state of Maine, I think there's going to be so much public pressure. It's going to be reasonably easy to renegotiate these contracts because people in Maine are really being taken for a ride. And if you don't win the House, which I do think we will, hopefully we can win the Senate also, then the governor is just going to need to put it on their shoulders and lean hard into this and force renegotiate those contracts, because the way it's heading now, you're just overly burdening senior citizens, low-income folks to the point that they can't manage that anymore. The hydro cap was a big issue too. And actually, before I say the hydro cap, once you get rid of net energy billing, if you can repeal that, the public policy charge that businesses are getting hammered with, that goes away, or most of it goes away. They can hire more people get money in their pocket, they're going to spend more money in the economy, tax revenue goes up, it's good. Get rid of the hydro cap that was put on by the King administration, 100 megawatts of hydro energy was the cap. I mean,
I've never understood why that was done.
He was trying to push wind at that point.
Yeah.
Right? He was in the wind business.
Oh, he was. It was very lucrative for him to be a Recovery Act consultant.
So why not do that? But you've got renewable, green energy, cheap all day long. New Hampshire gets a lot of that energy. You could buy it from Canada. But at the end of the day, what's most important now for the state is reliable baseload power at the cheapest possible cost for people in the state and businesses. The PUC, right? You've got a Democrat chairman, used to be the chair of the party, is in for 5 more years. So you've got to reweight the PUC around that person, right? Get more, rational thinking folks on that. The public advocate needs to be 100% consumer focused.
We need a PUC chairman who doesn't wear bow ties.
Yeah, that would be.
That's what Howie Carr used to tell me. You can't trust somebody who wears a bow tie.
Yeah, and all they do is approve rate increases. I mean, all they do, and then they story tell a bit. And
I think he's getting like $165,000 a year. It's decent money.
That's $165,000 too much, right? Then you've got to make sure there's no issues with fossil fuel storage, usage, transportation. Maine's never going to get off of fossil fuels, right? It's just not going to happen. People talk about creating a pipeline and stuff. The challenge is I don't think Massachusetts is ever going to sign off on that. So you do have an issue with getting enough natural gas in the state, so you've got to look for more creative solutions to do that. If you want to look at small nuclear, a lot of people are talking about, we talked about that at Common Sense, right? Those are 5.5 years just to build them. I mean, the average nuclear power plant, and I think there's about 450 in the country, is 7.5 years. So you can add that in, but you got a lot of older generation of folks that were still very concerned about Maine Yankee back in the day.
It's the baby boomers, man.
Yeah.
They've got the Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island propaganda living in their brains. The hippies. They smoked so much weed in the 70s that they're scared of nuclear. They don't understand small modular nuclear reactors.
So, and they can be a vocal group too, right? So you got to get through that, but it's so much safer than it used to be. And it'd be a huge benefit for the state, and then just put a culture in place that it's about inexpensive energy for people rather than saving the climate. And you know what? The climate's going to do fine. Technology advances are coming all the time, right? And so it's just free market principles will drive the removal of carbon from the atmosphere. That's a big industry in itself. Should not be subsidized at all by government to drive that into our state, and it's caused so much pain right now. I don't understand how the Democrats aren't honestly just completely remorseful about what they did to people in the state, right? And they keep trying to push it. But I think throughout this campaign, especially once you get through the primary, this is going to be a major talking point, and you can't defend this with sound bites. You can't defend this with, well, we removed this much carbon. You can't do it. You just got to press hard and say, well, do you understand the burden that you're putting on people? Do you understand the burden you're putting on businesses? And
we've heard from a lot of businesses that send us their power bills, and you'll see an $18,000 a month power bill, or from elderly people on fixed income who are wondering why they're used to paying $15 a month or something for power. That's what they remember, and suddenly their power bill is $280. I think there's a lot of that going on. I think the businesses are afraid to come out publicly and say what's happening to them.
Right.
And the old people feel like they don't have any recourse to there's no one that they can reach out to complain about this. You know, we alluded to it earlier that we spent some time studying organized crime and how it operates in Maine. The renewable industry is indiscernible from an organized crime family. They're contributing money to Democrats. Democrats turn around and vote to increase your power bill, and they make CMP collect it from your bill. Right. They're going to turn your power off if you don't pay these solar companies.
Right.
You know, you didn't want these solar panels. They're not on your property. The money is going to some company out of state. But if you don't pay that bill, they're going to turn your power off.
Yeah. And you've got what, 70, 80,000 Mainers that can't afford their electric bill right now? I mean, that's ridiculous. Then you add the property taxes, the overall tax burden, the housing costs, insurance. We're going to have the largest increase in insurance premiums in the country. It doesn't stop, right? So it just Maine's at a place where it's just such a heavy weight on people's shoulders. And that's why I honestly think we do have a really good chance to win this election. I think it's important for people on the Republican side to give a lot of thought to who they think's best lined up to win the primary. We're outnumbered by 40,000 votes in terms of registered Democrats, and you've got 300,000 plus independents. So to win this race, we need to pull in some independents. You got to get our own votes out. We got to get great voter turnout, and hopefully that'll happen because I think people are charged up. But there's a lot of disenchanted independents, and there's certainly disenchanted business owners on the Democratic side. I mean, I've talked to a lot of Democrat business owners. I said, "What do you think of the business environment?" And they just say it sucks. Hopefully, I can say that on this, right? That's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, you can't hide it anymore. Is the point? So, I think if you speak to people properly in the primary, shine some light on this, and it's not going to be easy, right? You're going to have a lot of money working against whoever's the Republican nominee. But if you're committed to it and you're going to get the messaging out properly, stay on message, and get it across to people, I think we've got a very good chance to win this time. Maybe we'll win by inches, but I think we can win.
So I guess the primary dynamics, one of the topics that's always coming up for conservatives is social issues and who is going to be like the most conservative on social issues. You already see a little bit of that dynamic emerging, and then inevitably the things that you did to win the primary become a liability in a general election.
You got to balance that.
So I mean, every candidate has to decide how to balance that for themselves, but I think the two issues that loom large are, one, the Governor Mills basically lying during her re-election campaign, saying she didn't want to change abortion policy, and then implementing the most radical, late-term abortion law we've ever seen, and then also the allowing boys to play in girls' sports, just the transgender ideology generally, the imposition of this ideology through public institutions. I think those are two areas where the activist base on the conservative side is very energized. We saw this with Representative Laurel Libby getting censured, but on the other side, the Democrats seem very interested to get Planned Parenthood back in the game. They'd love nothing more than to make an election around abortion like they did with Governor LePage and Mills in 2022. So I guess, how do you, when you're approaching something like this, both from a philosophical and policy perspective, but also from a political perspective, how do you navigate that?
Well, certain things, being from outside politics and not being a politician, I think is more just to take the practical approach. I mean, on abortion, you had a law back in 2019 before she changed it that seemed to work for everybody. I think it could be as simple as that. Not everyone's going to be happy on either side.
Well, I mean, that's what if you voted for Mills, technically you voted for the status quo since 1993 or something like that.
It's been around for a long time.
So like 95% at least of Maine voters in 2022 voted for the abortion laws from 1993 until
just kind of put that on their head, which kind of turned it all over. So I think there can be some rational thoughts around that. In terms of girls and boys sports, that's a non-starter, right? You have to support women's opportunities, locker rooms, sports teams. So that's just a safety issue, fairness issue, the intent of Title IX. So that's kind of a settled issue for me.
Given that you defined part of your career succeeding at Planet Fitness before you went to Crunch, Planet Fitness for a lot of conservative activists is like woke. This is the woke gym.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that
like
that was long after I left, by the way.
Well, just talking about in Republican primaries and attack ads, it doesn't really matter how long ago it was. You'll find yourself answering for all kinds of things, I'm sure. But I guess how do you navigate that as like in a professional setting, the imposition of the woke agenda as you're trying to run this business, and now seeing that potentially as someone using that as a liability against you?
I think, look, right now I think the field of candidates are pretty much level set to we just need to win. At some point down the road, someone's probably going to get aggressive.
Yeah, I was going to say, they always say that.
They
always say that. They always say, oh, no, we're all just going to hold hands and say positive things about each other and walk across the finish line.
I guess, you know what? Like, I've been around the block. We'll handle that when we get there, if someone's going to go overboard on that, I think they're going to have to be prepared to manage their own situation going forward. It's not in my DNA to go out and attack Republicans. I always believe that you play your own game and make people react to you. But you're right to say sometimes you can't get all that proper messaging out. Like I think somebody made a comment about me for that effect, but I think it was about California. But people don't know that every business in California has to have bathrooms where you can just go in with whatever sex you identify as. Oh,
okay. So you guys had so many locations, you were just complying with the
certain state
policies.
It doesn't matter who you are. That's just how it is. And in one of the other companies I worked for, we've had situations where you could have a gentleman walk into the gym one day, say he's a guy. The next day he could come in, full beard, whatever, say he's a woman, walk straight into the locker room, the ladies' locker room. Women come out so mad, and then they come out, they're yelling at you, and you can't say anything besides talk to the state. It's insane how some of these states are run. Maine's headed down that road, so that has to be stopped, right? That's completely inappropriate all the way around, but certain states are literally that hard on it. I can't speak to what Planet did. I left them so long ago. If they whatever decision they need to make for their stock price, that's them. Has nothing to do with me, but I think those types of attacks are pretty thin.
I asked this question of former Congressman Bruce Poliquin when he was in here, because he was another guy who was a successful private sector businessman, came to Maine, didn't like what he saw, wanted to, and now currently wants to lend his talents to improving things in the state. I think it's an interesting question, but what can you tell us about a time when you had a big break in professionally, like a moment where you landed like that next big job or had like a great, for Bruce it was a good investment, but tell us about a time where you had like some huge success economically.
Economically, for most business people, the big success you have is when you sell the company, that you're running or a part of, right? Or if you're in a company that issues equity incentives to individuals, which a lot of companies in the state do, right? And that's what you want to see. You want to see companies grow up and give people some ownership in the business, and then they sell, and it really helps people's economic situations. So, for me, obviously, economic opportunity came when the businesses I was either running or part of had sold at that point, and I was participating in that. So that's capitalism 101, right? Yeah. For me, my career took a long time, right? I was always, in my mind, held back longer than I should have been held back to get to that next level. And that was a constant point of frustration for me, but then you have to be self-reflective on, well, what can I do better? That doesn't mean your manager or whoever was above you actually had the right judgment in holding you back. I'm sure a lot of people have similar stories like that.
Why did you feel you were held back?
Because at the time, you sometimes when you're younger, you think you know more than you do about, and we're talking
I
about,
did.
about structural.
I don't know about everybody else, but I actually did.
Structural operations. I did. But then, when you really get into the weeds, if you want to be really good at what you do, then you can be very self-reflective and say, you know what, that was a gap, or that was a gap, or that was a gap. Now, sometimes, like I said, I've seen plenty of people hold people back for the wrong reasons. They just don't. But in my personal situations, it always felt like when I felt I should have been promoted at a given year, Maybe it took 2 more years. But when I got that promotion, I knew exactly what I was doing. And those lessons that I learned in those 2 years, I was grateful for those. Do you know what I mean? So my career's somehow just always taken those types of steps, right? So I've been what I felt to be overly prepared for the next step. And then when you get to the next step, you realize there's still so much you need to learn. I think if you're ever a CEO of a company, which I have been, you still have to be very humble in the fact that you don't know everything, and you need smarter people around you that can run certain aspects of things better. And you just have to be the best at having all these folks work together, right? And then you have your strategy, your tactics, your timing on any initiative that you want to put in place. So if you're going in to work on, the main care situation, you've got to break down what's the plan on here, what's our timing, what's our strategy, what are our tactics. Put that in place. You have the team, you have your leads. You do the same thing for each of these. So you can get multiple processes going with all sorts of different functions in the state government. You got 15 primary departments, and they all have sub-departments under them, right, with about 14,000 employees of the state. You can have that thing running fairly smooth once you get the smartest people in the room working in all those given areas, right? Then it's just coordination.
Do you think you would have been as successful as you are or were? I think you're still successful, having sold the company, if you had finished college? Or would that have put you on a different path?
It's a hard question to answer because I never graduated, right? So you're kind of just hypothesizing on what it would have been. But I think the way I learned was the way I needed to learn, right? Like, I've encouraged my kids to go to college, but if they didn't go to college, I'm going to encourage them just as much too. Structural learning sitting in the classroom for me, it felt slow. You know what I mean? I'm not like some tech executive or, Bill Gates or these guys that just blow out and go build these incredible things. I didn't learn that way. I had to have my hands on it, right? And I had to figure it out. Maybe I didn't get all the information. So I think the blessing for me was actually cleaning those machines, because you're sitting down in the gym when everybody's working out and you're on your knees getting dirty, wiping things down, cleaning up people's dirt and sweat and cleaning the toilets and the bathrooms and all that stuff. And you see things from this perspective, right? And then when you move up to this level or that level or that level, you never forget this perspective from here, just like you never forget being on food stamps, right? And what it took to get off of that. So I think that's helped me sort of ingrain the things that I know much more solidly, if that makes sense, right? And then you can draw on those sort of basic principled lessons that you learn throughout your life and apply that to, more complex situations going forward, meaning if it's a complex situation, you're going to try to break it down to the most simplest factors, right? That you can work with to affect change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of the way my brain works.
So I want to talk about national politics a little bit, starting with the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, because naturally you've worked in the fitness industry, so I'm sure you've probably had some conversations about this or some thought about this. What do you think of this alliance between Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and President Trump to do things like removing red dye 40 from food? Right. The press conference yesterday about Tylenol and vaccines, and I guess generally with the Make America Healthy Again movement. What are your thoughts there? Is it something that you look to just support or mimic here in the state of Maine? Because we're not known to be the healthiest. Right. We're not known as the healthiest state.
That's a bunch of different ways to look at that, right? I mean, I fully support folks being healthier, right? I mean, one of the things I always used to say in the fitness industry was, if you take care of yourself, which is just exercise and eat well, which I know you do, you're in great shape.
Not as much as I should.
But you get more years from your life and more life from your years, right? And what do you want for everybody, everywhere? You want them to enjoy their life, right?
And also you spend less money on health care.
Quite a bit more.
You use less Medicaid and Medicare. Yeah, that's one way we could reduce the state budget, is if everybody was healthy.
That's true. Yeah,
instead of a work requirement, it should be like a lapse requirement.
It should. I mean, but it makes such a difference, right? You look at someone who's, been engaged in even walking, something as simple as that, right? And a salad once in a while. It's going to make a tremendous difference in your life. The things like the red dyes and other things, the American food system, I mean, there's a lot, right? Have you ever seen this app called Yuka?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
If you scan your food, the first thing you're going to do, if anybody listening to your podcast, if they get that app, they're going to go throw out a bunch of food in their house because it tells you this is dangerous. These are okay. These are good. And you're like, oh my God, I've been eating this. And my kids are eating this.
I've used the Yuka app. It's YUKA for anyone who wants to go download it. We actually have a family game where we try to find the least healthy thing we can in a grocery store.
That's a good way to do it.
But I've used it in Canada and in the U.S. on the same product.
Interesting.
I'll admit I like a little A1 sauce with my steak from time to time.
Sure.
A1 sauce in Canada is totally different than A1 sauce in America. A1 sauce in America will flag, but the ingredients list, it's identical.
Yeah.
But the actual ingredients are totally different, and it's less healthy in America. So yeah, I mean, sorry to go off on a Yuka tangent, but it's true.
There's a lot of things in our food system that shouldn't be there, right? Because it's all about shelf life, it's all about profitability, it's all about margin, right? It's all about volume, and it just leads to bad health. And I do certainly believe, nutrition in kids affects, behavior and, sleep patterns and effectiveness in school. If you're all hopped up on sugar and you don't get enough sleep and you go into school tired the next day, it's hard for kids. It's hard. And look, it's hard for parents too, honestly, to make, sure you have nutritional meals on the table all the time. So if you can get the food industry to make that a little easier on parents, I'm all for that. You don't want to just destroy businesses, but you gotta put health first, right? That's your job as in government, is to take care of people. So if there's unhealthy things going in there, that's definitely something you got to get rid of. In terms of medications and things, that's outside of my purview to comment on something like Tylenol and autism. I don't have the scientific knowledge behind that, but I do think it's incredibly important to look at what's the average kid take for vaccines over their childhood now. It's like 96
Oh yeah, I think it's up. It's very, very high. I've seen the meme that's going around of the vaccine schedule, and I think 1984, 1987 versus 2024, and it's a lot more clustered. Very close.
So is that all that every kid needs that, or is there some pharmaceutical industry influence in that? Right? Is there profit in that? Obviously, we saw a tremendous amount of, I don't want to create a big COVID controversy, but you saw a lot of money moving around for those vaccines.
Well, I mean, I think anyone who's honest will admit that there's some perverse incentives around vaccines, just like there were around COVID, around healthcare mandates. There's a ton of money to be made getting the government to recommend or encourage or mandate your product. Right. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a product the government forces every kid to be injected with?
Sure. And if you dig into the process on how those approvals happen too, there's some pretty interesting things. So I mean, I'm all
maybe Nirav Shah could come in here and talk with us about that.
That'd be great. Yeah, maybe put him with another chair right there. I think I'm all for properly and in a well thought out way doing anything possible to get people in the country healthier. Right. I mean, it's just you want people to live longer, enjoy their lives more.
On another national politics moment, we're sitting here, I guess almost 2 weeks after Charlie Kirk was assassinated out in Utah. My expectations of how big of an event this was going to be have been surpassed just by the size of the ceremony this weekend, people's reaction to it, and the cultural change that you can sense from people who you've never talked politics with before, but they're talking about Charlie Kirk, or they're talking about the left's reaction to Charlie Kirk. So I guess how did you experience that, couple day period
I probably
after the assassination?
Like almost everybody else. I mean, first was just utter shock. I mean, you don't believe what you saw, because obviously these horrifically graphic videos went around in moments, and you would open them and you didn't know what you were looking at until you saw it. I'm sure you saw it, and almost everybody in the country did. And then you just ponder. It's like, how could that happen? What is next? Why are we here? What's this guy done? That deserves that, right? You have challenging conversations. That's challenging conversation. That's all that is. So things have gotten out of control. So I didn't know how to process it initially. Talked to a lot of people, right? Thought about it. There are a lot of calls went around for anybody who's in politics right now. People thought about you. And what you do.
Yeah, everybody's reminded me that I'd be at the top of the assassination list, which I take as a compliment, definitely. But I don't need any more reminders.
No, but I mean, then it's just like, where's the boundaries, right? And then to see the vitriol on the left is terrible. I mean, in fairness, there's been a couple fringe folks on the right. If something's bad has happened to somebody on the left, that some people celebrate that too. Occasionally, it's much more on the left, but obviously there's no place for any of that. What's the change going to be? That's one of those things I think you have to wait for, right? Everything's very, very fresh now, and I mean, as soon as you bring it up, obviously it drives the same feelings, that you had when it happened. But this is one of those things. What's it going to be in 6 months? What's it going to be in a year? The country has very short-term memory in a lot of these things, and that's the scary part, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like by the time Charlie Kirk was assassinated, we'd already forgotten that they tried to kill President Trump twice.
Right.
They actually shot him in the head.
So how much desensitized
a shooter, an individual shooter who was responsible for his actions, shot the president in the head, just like Charlie was shot. Some people are critical of using the term "they," but I do believe it was a group effort on the left to assassinate Charlie Kirk.
It could have been. Now, I mean, there's some stuff going around now, right, in terms of a different shooting.
Oh, his co-conspirators, but also the movement, I think, that contributed to dehumanizing Charlie and all conservatives by labeling them as fascists. I mean, Biden tweeted out, 50 or 60 times that Trump was a threat to democracy. Eventually, people come to believe that stuff.
Right. And I guess that's the point I'm getting at. So what is how much have people been desensitized right now? So is this acceptable? Is this normal? Is it like, okay, well, that happened. I'm just not going to affect my life. I'm going to go on and not care about that. When you stop caring, right, that's when it's hard to reverse. So that's why you need more people to get out and talk about it in the proper way, right, and to drive change, especially politicians and influencers, right. I think it's a responsibility to pull this one back in if it can be pulled in. Some people say it's Pandora's box is open now, you'll never get it back, but you have to make the effort to pull it back because it's horrifying. And it, certainly it can never happen again. But you're just saying that you already know something like this is probably going to happen again. But all responsible people need to do what they can to try to pull this one back in.
Have you seen any elected official in Maine taking the steps to pull it back in? Because I haven't.
Not really yet, no.
Representative Pingree voted against a resolution honoring, honoring Charlie Kirk. I haven't really seen any steps taken by
Did Jared Golden vote
top
in support
politicians.
of that?
I believe he did.
I
believe he did, yeah.
I don't know if that's politically motivated or what, but no, but I mean, you that's why you need change too, right? And I think politicians in some situations, regardless of whether something happens on the left or the right, you have to stand for what's proper, right? And what's the right moral thing to do. And not enough people do it, but again, that's change you have to bring. Every individual who decides to go into politics has to bring that change on their own.
Well, I guess the last question that I'll ask is, we've been talking a lot about different reforms and the left-wing ideology that has brought a lot of the current policies Mainers are living and suffering under into existence. And something that I wrangle with myself is, do you think that we're in this position as a state because of the incompetence of political leaders, or is it corruption? Because I see strains of both. There's evidence for both. But do you think that does Maine have a incompetence, bad government problem, or do we have a corruption problem?
I think there's a couple of parts to it, right? I mean, there's definitely corruption in there, right? If you're going to be willing to overlook fraud, if you're going to be willing to overlook, overdoses and drug-based deaths, if you're going to be willing to overlook all the Maine taxpayers' money that's being spent on, benefits for illegal migrants and things like that, that's fraud. Anyway,
and the huge Chinese drug trafficking conspiracy, not to mention among things
on so many levels
that are being overlooked.
So many levels. And then incompetence, look, I don't mind saying there's definitive budgetary and financial incompetence, right? Decisions aren't made on what's actually practical and can be done, right? Decisions now are being made on, well, there's more people, so there's more money. Just go get it from the people in the state. That's no problem. So there's no real thought on that. And then I think, ideology by, I don't think every single person in the Democratic Party feels good about it, but, they're they're pushed to think of one mind. I mean, you know what goes on over in Augusta if somebody's going to try and vote against the party, right? They're going to bring that person back down to earth very quickly, or find a way to, retaliate against them. So I think it's also, the driven ideology that they feel they're obligated to stick with. So I think you get those three components, right? All of which have to be changed.
Where can people go if they want to find out more about your campaign?
benforgovernor.com.
Also, that's a prime real estate. What'd you buy that like 10 years ago?
Yeah, about 6 or 7. Yeah, but
that's fantastic.
Yeah, but it's great, and having a ton of fun running all over the state. I mean, just getting to meet people and talk about the issues. And when you really sit down with just somebody you meet, right? That's when you really figure out what's important. All the answers are in the communities, right?
Yeah.
You can't.
Have you gotten to a Maine? Have you gotten to a Maine town yet that you're surprised that there's a town in Maine named that?
Not yet. I mean, I've been looking around.
Mine was like West Purgatory.
Purgatory.
There's a West Purgatory, Maine.
I haven't been there yet.
It's all kinds of great
I'll
Maine
go
names.
there.
Yeah. You'll be in Purgatory someday, I'm sure. It depends on how Catholic you are, I guess.
That's great.
Well,
thanks,
Ben,
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming into studio to talk with us, and hopefully I'll see you up on a debate stage at some point again soon.
Great. Love to be there. Thanks a lot, Steve.